Okay, everybody see a slideshow up there that shows a tower on it? Everybody set looking good? Okay, looks good. So I think everybody knows that I like doing DXing and I like doing contesting and for probably several months I've been hearing people have been chewing on my ear about how lousy 10 meters has been, and that's where a lot of the hardcore DXing goes on, both 15, 12, and 10 meters. So the last 5 days, 10 meters has been very much wide open and very active. I was just watching 10 meters a few moments ago, and there was still plenty of activity. I think last night it went on until after 10 o'clock, and it's been doing quite good. I ended up getting Namibia. That's a African country that's down in the southwest part of the country. I got Wallis Island. I got Benin, which is another African country. They're on the west coast. Um, there was, uh, boy, there's several expeditions in the South Pacific going on right now, and I was able to get both of those guys. So it was yesterday evening and afternoon was a great harvest here on getting out and catching lots of DX. Matter of fact, surprising things. I was even working stuff later in the evening. I was up on 80 meters, and you don't usually find much DX there, but I ended up picking off about three or four really rare stuff there in on 80 meters last night. So that was pretty cool. Now the disappointing thing is that after I downloaded my logs and stuff, confirmations this evening from World Book or Logbook of the World, it still didn't budge my overall context for a DX out there, but it helped to fill in a couple other countries or a couple other bands that I hadn't worked places. Oh, also Antarctica. Boy, Antarctica, I worked on 10, 15, 30 meters, and also 80 meters last night. And this evening I was on 12 meters and I tried closing on contact and just couldn't get it done for Antarctica. So speaking of doing DXing, I think everybody knows that a good DXer is not mandatory, but it's always nice to have a nice tall tower and a nice high powered beam up on top of that tower. So I was going to talk about what it means to end up putting up a tower and what you end up going through. So this whole program is just going to be talking about towers and how you get the darn things up there. So steps that you have for doing this. So, and I'm going to be breaking this down into a bunch of steps. So first of all, you need to figure out what kind of tower you're going to do, how tall you want it to be, if you want a guide or a self-supporting tower, new or used. Um, so you kind of want to make those kind of general decisions up front. I think everybody knows these days, new towers is, I'll just say, insanely expensive. And so I've been pretty much just using the used tower avenue. So I've come up with some very nice used towers that have worked out very well for me for a fraction of the cost of a new tower. And once you get a tower, then it's also pretty expensive in getting it up in the air. We'll go through those kinds of steps. So as you're working through the planning process, one of the things you want to do is contact your local or county planning office and find out what their requirements. They may have, if you live in town, they may be height restrictions, but they'll have a whole litany of requirements that you have to jump through. Now, in this program, I'm not going to jump through it because every county is different, every city is different, and there's just too much variation to deal with it. And if you're going that direction, then a lot of times you can get on the radio and get some uh, guidance from other hams. that have worked their way through that process for that particular location. So once you find out what you have to, the hoops you have to jump through from your local planning department, you have to draw up some documents, plot map on where you're going to do it. There's likely some engineering documents you have to pull together. You may have to consult a mechanical engineer to get some of the documents that are needed for a presentation to the planning department. So after you got through all of the paper handling stuff, then it's time to roll up your sleeves and do some work. So the next thing you got to do is dig a hole for a foundation that you're going to put in place. You're going to have to either have built or build a wire cage that goes into the hole that you just dug. Then you're going to have to fill that hole with a bunch of concrete and then wait patiently for that concrete to solidify. And then you get to end up raising your tower up in the air, and that's the glorious moment. And then once you get it up in the air, then you get to adorn it with some aluminum equipment, like your antennas. So let me preface a few things here. So for me, I'm an old guy. I don't like climbing towers. I don't like heights. So I want all of my antennas whenever I'm working on a tower. I want all of that stuff to come back down to earth, down to ground level. I'm okay at working on my towers with a step ladder and putting antennas on it and doing all the work at ground level. I do not want to end up climbing that tower. So that's a prerequisite for my needs. So I have two towers up right now. I have one that's a US tower. It's a TX 455. So that's a 55-foot tower that's up in the air. I also have a Wilson tubular tower. It's an older guy, and that's about a 45-foot tower up there. So these are all previously loved towers. So that means that they've been used. So when you get something that's used, you have to end up usually putting some extra work into cleaning them up and making them presentable and fixing and repairing and doing a few odds and ends before you end up putting things up. But I'll tell you what, when it comes to finding used towers, used equipment, the amount of money you pay for the tower is a fraction of what uh, it costs brand new. So this is the good old TX 455. It's a three-section tower. It nests itself. It cranks itself up. There's usually either a motor or a crank on the side or winch that ends up lifting the sections up, and it will give you a platform at about 55 feet up in the air. It also has a raising fixture, so you can take that once you collapse everything down, you can lower that thing down to ground level and work at it at ground level. This is a Wilson, also US Tower has basically the same model, same design, just doesn't change. But Wilson is a little older manufacturer, so it's a tubular tower. So this has a 6-inch tube on it, has a raising fixture. This comes in, you can mount this to a side of a house. I'm a little bit reluctant to do that because there's a lot of forces that you have to account for as far as securing that tower, that tube into the side of the house. It also comes with, you can put a rotator underneath that and rotate the entire tower underneath that if you want to. It's a little bit different supporting tower for it. But that has 3 tubes on the inside. Each one of those, the body of that is 20 feet, the 6-inch tubes, and then you have a 4.5 and then a 2.5-inch tube in the inside, and that will get you about 50 feet up in the air. So, planning. Whenever you do a big project like this, planning is priceless. You got to do the planning. If you really plan things out, you're not going to end up running into snags, or you got to a well enough idea of what you're going to be doing so you can work around problems. But you got to do the planning up front. If you do the planning up front, all of this stuff is just like following a cookbook. So providing you write your plan down, you just follow the cookbook, and everything works like it should.
Hey, Mike, alongside power lines, also look for gas lines if you're digging into the ground.
Oh yeah, yep. Gas line, power lines. If you're putting something or septic systems, there's a lot of things that you want to look for when you put the thing in the ground. You dig that hole that you might run into. So first of all, I highly recommend first get permission from your spouse on what you want to do. If you don't, you're going to pay a big penalty there. Um, I've seen too many reports on guys that have put their towers up close to power lines. Sometimes you can't avoid it, but unavoided things happen and towers fall or move the wrong direction and fall into power lines, and it's not a good outcome. It is terrible. So I really like staying away from power lines. Also, power lines is a big source of RFI, and you will continually fight problems with radio frequency interference, power line noise getting into your radio. So if you at all, you can stay away from those things. So once you figure out a plot on where you want to plant this thing, also look at how you're going to get equipment into that area and how you're going to bring the material into that. If you have cranes or other things that you need, tractors and stuff you need to bring into that area, think about how you're going to get it in and get it out of that area. Um, Also, once you get your tower up, think about your coax and rotor control cables on how you're going to get those cables into your ham shack. It's always important keeping your coax runs as short as possible. Rotor cables, if you have a long run, you got to have bigger conductors in it to run your rotator. So if you have a tilt over tower, which I highly recommend, you think about the direction of where things are going to be tilting. You can't tilt the dang thing into your house or you're into your garage or whatever. You need to make sure that thing can have, when it does tilt over, it has plenty of room to tilt over without any obstructions. And then the number one thing you got to do, read the manufacturer documentation, and don't just read it one time, read it multiple times. Make darn good and sure that you understand those instructions inside and out, what they're trying to say, how it means, what it means for your installation, and how everything is supposed to come together. Very important information comes out of that manual. So once you've done all your planning, you need to get your project approved. So that's usually approval from your spouse and an approval from uh, the um, local project planning people. So here's the first thing you need to do: dig a hole. Now, I'm blessed with I have a nice tractor that has a reasonable backhoe on it. So I have a shovel that has a large hydraulic cylinder on it that makes moving dirt and rock and moving material out of that hole much nicer. So if you notice there that that's on a nice lawn. I'm, I like my lawn to look really nice, and I'm always very proud of how green and plush it always looks. So I have lots of uh, of plywood laid down to protect the lawn. If you notice the outriggers on the tractor, they have buffers on that. Even the front loader, I have a um, protection so it doesn't dig up the grass on that. So I'm stupidly anal about not tearing up my lawn. and you'll see as we go through pictures, it came out pretty darn well. So let's see what it means. So the hole that I needed to dig there was a 5 foot by 5 foot by 8 foot deep hole. So that's a pretty good size hole. Now my back hole will reach down about 7 feet. So it doesn't quite get to the bottom of that. So if I back up to the picture, you notice that there's a whole bunch of blocking underneath the bucket for the tractor. So I can lift that whole front end of the tractor up and tilt it down and get almost down to that 8 foot level. So that's just me thinking out of the box to solve a problem. So once you get the hole dig, you still have to go through the hole. You need to square up the sides, make it nice and square. And you need to flatten out the bottom so you have a good solid bottom down there. So there is a little bit of handwork that you have to do to end up getting the right size hole in fitted out to fit everything into that.
Hey, Mike,
Yo,
did you have to go so deep because you're not using any guy wires?
right, this is self-supporting. This is a self-supporting tower at 55 feet. Actually, I'll clue you into one other thing that makes some more sense as you go through it. So the block of cement that I put in there, it's made to handle a 72-foot tower. So all of the so that 5 by 5 by 8 hole is for a 72-foot tower. So I have two sets of pins in there that I can take either a 55-foot or a 72-foot tower on that same block there. Now, at the time, all I had access to was a 55-foot tower. I've been shopping for a lot of years for a 72, but everyone I find that is always rusted out, something's bent, something's broken on it. I've never not found a perfect tower for a reasonable price out there. So I'm still at my uh,
Yeah,
55-foot tower.
I just appreciate that because I'm used to at least, where I came up with towers. It's like, yep, you want a cubic yard, 3 by 3 by 3.
Yep, yep, yeah. You're just doing a regular old guide tower. Um, there you can do a whole lot less concrete. Just a cubic meter of concrete is all you need there to set it on. But you have all the guiding that goes around and you know, to each his own. But my requirement is that I have to have that antenna come down to ground level for me to work on.
What's the weight of that chunk of concrete?
I
Like,
don't I don't know. It's 8 cubic yards. So you can probably look that up on the web to find out. That's 5,500 psi concrete that we put in there. So the other thing is that you have to do is that you get all this dirt out of the ground. Well, what the heck do you do with the dirt to get rid of it? So if you notice there that my ground there is pretty dang clean. There's a wheelbarrow off to the left there. It actually has a different size bucket in it, but or a different size scrape in it. But basically, I pull the dirt out of it, load it into my wheelbarrow, and then I would move the dirt off my grass there. This is behind my garage. You're on the back side of the garage, so all that dirt has to get hauled around to the front of it and off to the side. So I had a big, huge pile of dirt there when I got finished with all of this stuff that I had to haul out. But at least it didn't set on my lawn and didn't mess it up. That's how anal I am about my lawn. So one of the main things that you'll get in the back end of the manufacturer specification is a sheet that shows how big of a hole you need to dig, how much concrete, the kind of rebar, the size of the rebar, how it needs to get bent, the type of concrete that you need to put in there. You have all these specifications. And this is really important because when we get into building that rebar cage, you can actually take this set of specs into the guys you're buying that rebar from. If it's a metal shop, you pay a premium for it. and they will cut and bend all that rebar up to your exact specifications. Then you get real nice bends on all the corners and everything like this. But spend a lot of time looking at all of this information because it is really important. It also tells you the size of anchors you need to put into the concrete and how long it needs to be. So, very important piece of material here. Okay, next step, rebar. You need to build a rebar cage. So this is what holds all the concrete. It adds the rigidity to the concrete, keeps it from cracking, holds it all together. And so on this project here, this was so much rebar and so big, it was not something I could lift it up with my tractor and set it in place, but it was just incredibly wobbly. And so I decided to go ahead and build the cage in the hole. So that means that all of the ones that go, the horizontal pieces, I bent those up myself. I had to do a little bit of metalworking. So I built a rebar bender. And so those I bent by myself to fit into my hole. Unfortunately, where I live, I don't have the ability to buy rebar and have someone go through there and bend it up for me. I had to do it myself. So that's the beginning of the cage that I was putting together. So that's me down at the very bottom of it, and that's the outer layer of the cage. There's a whole bunch of rebar that goes on the inside of it, and it gets really hairy to build that rebar up and get it into that very small area. So I had to add the rebar, stand on it, or actually stand on the edges and work my way up from the bottom up with all the rebar that went into the inside of it. If you notice down on the bottom there, there are some cinder blocks there on each one of the corners. Those are the gray things. You never ever want to put that rebar into the dirt. You always want to end up keeping that stuff out of it. So when you fill that hole up with concrete, it keeps the rebar out of the dirt. Else that rebar will just corrode and decay and become worthless.
So on your checklist, you also check to see if there's anybody you need to make disappear.
Yeah, for extra fill. Actually, there's a comical thing. I don't have the picture here, but you can see in my pocket there's a little yellow pencil. That pencil in this one here ended up down at the bottom of the hole. When I did the hole um, for the tubular tower, while I was working and putting in all the cross bracing on the internal of that, my pencil fell out there, and it also ended up down at the end of the fill for the hole. So that's the one thing that I don't have any bodies, but I have a pencil that belonged to me on each one of those things.
Just remember
So,
that a body creates a cavity that then
right,
compromises the structure of your tower.
yeah, it rots away and disappears. So, this is the cage that I just did. I did not do a real nice hole. I did a quick and dirty um, set of rebar, and it's a much smaller hole. It's only a 3 by 3 by 6 foot deep. And there I actually paid for those stupid yellow feet. Those stupid yellow feet are like $3 a piece. I think $3.50 a piece. Or cinder block, I think was I don't know, $1.50 or something like that. So the other thing that you're really not supposed to do is weld a bunch of your stuff together. But on this one here, I did weld things together because I didn't want to have continuous. I was cheaped out on the amount of rebar that I used, and I just spliced it together. I just welded it together to put it all together. So that's why the things are kind of doubled up on things. Uh, let's see. Oh, my pencil hadn't fallen into the hole on the picture on the right side there. So rebar cage. you need to follow the manufacturer's instructions on both sides and how the things are supposed to be bent and how things are supposed to be put together. The really stupid things, rebar is some of the cheapest, crappiest steel that you can buy. Um, the specs are really loose and it's not really very hard. It's easy to bend and stuff like that, but it's bloody expensive. I think for the big tower, that was done almost 10 years ago. That was probably almost $200, 200, it was over $200 for the rebar that went into that. The one that I just did this last week, that rebar there was like 150 bucks for just that little bunch of rebar that went into it. So it's really kind of expensive on what goes into that stuff.
Mike?
So, yeah,
I was just gonna say, for the tower we put out at LC, we paid for the rebar and the cement, but we had people, professionals, do all that stuff. But the rebar cost us, I think, almost $2,000. And that was a 5 by 5 by 5 or something we didn't dig as deep as you. Maybe 8 feet by 5 feet by 5 feet deep,
but
but
yeah,
it cost us almost $2,000 in rebar.
but that was the bending and the wiring all that rebar together.
No,
And
the
so,
labor was free, was donated. That's just
really,
the rebar itself.
2K?
Yep.
I'd like to see the invoice on that.
Yeah. It was insane.
But I mean, and rebar's junk steel.
Yeah, it is.
So the one thing is that once you work out your plan, you need to figure out how you're going to get that damn cage into the hole. Are you going to build it in the hole? If you're going to lift it in the hole, understand that, that this cage here, when I got finished with it, 4 guys could not lift that. There was just that much weight in this. So there was no way that 5 guys were going to be able to haul that thing over and drop it in the hole. It just was way too heavy for that. This guy here, there's no way that, I mean, it doesn't look like much rebar, but it's still pretty good size. It was way beyond my ability to lift it, but it was all put together really stiffly so I could lift it with the tractor and drop it in the hole very nicely. Because this hole was small enough where I was not going to be able to build that into the hole, just not enough room to end up working inside that. Okay, the next thing is anchors. So you're going to have some kind of a base that you're going to end up attaching your tower to, and that base has to have anchor bolts that anchors into that great big blob of concrete. So it's really important because you got to have those anchor bolts exactly aligned to your um, your anchoring mechanism there. So the best thing to do is go ahead, just take your anchor and put your anchor bolts into that and let it go into the into the hole where you're going to fill it. Also, you just can't use rebar, throw it in there, and you got to have something blocking. Those gray blobs in there, that's 1/2 inch steel. I think it's 1/2 inch 6x6 steel that's welded onto those anchor bolts. So those anchor bolts cannot pull loose and cannot pull through the concrete there. You also, once you get it in there, you need to wire everything together so those anchor bolts don't flop around and lose alignment. So that's another tedious thing that gets done when you're hanging upside down to get everything tied together. Also, you can see there where I have the 45-foot tower in there and then the other pegs in there for putting in the 72-foot tower if I wanted to it. So for the tubular tower, what I did was, you could see here on the left picture here, actually you can see the rusty base. That base got all chewed off right down to bare metal and repainted, so it all looked brand spanking new. Looked gorgeous when I got finished with it, but it got cleaned up. So, but what I did was took the bolts, ran it the um, into the raising mechanism there, and then put 2 sets of blocking pieces of steel that goes down into the concrete that holds everything stiff and in place, and make sure that those anchor bolts cannot pull out of the concrete whatsoever. And then the picture on the right shows that whole raising mechanism and the anchor bolts going down into the cage there, and you can see all the cross bracing that goes interlaces through the through those anchor bolts. And believe me, that's no fun working upside down to get all of that stuff put together and wired up down there. Those are 3 foot. Yeah, I think those are. I can't remember if those are. These are 3 foot long. The other ones were 4 foot long. The bigger on the bigger tower. Okay, so when you set the measurements and set where those anchor bolts are going to go, just don't use a tape measure. You're going to be off by 1/4 of an inch, and on those bases, they're usually made from 3/4 to 1.25 inch steel, and you just can't get in there with a file or something to enlarge the hole or change the hole to resize things. So I really suggest taking that bottom section on your tower and use that for the guide for holding those anchor bolts in place. It has to be perfectly aligned for the tower. There ain't any way that you want any play. It needs to be spot on. Okay, now it's time to add the magic elixir and glue all this stuff together. So this is what it looked like after I filled that hole with a whole bunch of concrete. Now this is kind of roughed in, which is typically what you do with concrete. You don't look for a perfectly flat surface. You just get enough glue, enough concrete in place. Now note that where those anchor bolts come up, the bottom bolts there are not submerged in concrete. You must keep those bottom nuts out of the concrete, because those you will use to level the tower. And later on, you'll see how some of this stuff gets covered up. So being that my project was back behind another building, there was no way of getting the cement truck or getting there was no way of getting the cement truck back into that area. There just wasn't any room for it. So I had to rent a pumper. So you can see the cement pumper. On that, there's a 6-foot hose. And I'll tell you what, hanging on to that 6-foot hose and pumping 8 yards of concrete with the immense pressure that that pumper pushes the concrete through, the weight of all that concrete in that hose, that is a total man beater. I was thrashed at the end of the day holding on and feeding all that concrete into that hole. Anyway, that's just an extra cost that when you put a tower in, you may end up having to consider about how you end up getting the concrete there. So this is the thing. This is what it looked like after got it all leveled out and flattened out and stuff like that. I would say don't make it that pretty. You don't need it, because you're going to be adding some more concrete on top of that as kind of a topping layer to take and make it look nice and pretty. But anyway, that's me. But you notice my grass, it's all nice and green. It's looking pretty darn nice considering all the stuff that's gone on underground and above ground. Okay, so when you order concrete, make dang good sure you order the right amount. You cannot afford to be short. You cannot be. So you got to be dead on ordering that concrete. And the masters, the guy that filled up that concrete truck, they're pretty dang accurate on how you do that. But it's better to be over than pay a little extra than to be under. You just don't want to do that. So if you have a short load like that tubular tower, I only needed 3 yards for that. But anytime you order less than 4 yards, you pay a premium for it, and it's really, really expensive to get a short load. I tried um, other places that would do the mixing on site. I tried fence guys. I tried all kinds of stuff, and nobody came up with a solution that was any better than just having to pay for a short load to get delivered. But you can mix it on site. 4 yards, that is 1 yard is pretty insane to mix it yourself. I can't think of even doing 3 yards myself, much less 8 yards. So generally the strength that you want is about 3,500 PSI. The rock mix and there are a bunch of other things that you'll be asked for, but usually the instructions for concrete from the vendor tells you exactly what you want. It also is nice to add to rent a vibrator that basically, as you're filling the hole, you can vibrate the mix and it will take and work out any bubbles or holes and that might get trapped in the concrete. So once you get that hole filled, now the wait starts. So you get 28 days to recover from getting your body beaten up from filling the hole with concrete. And it takes 28 days for that concrete to curve. And you can look up charts and you can see how long it, even at 28 days, I think it's still at 90%, but that's good enough to say that's good enough. So that's the chunk of concrete there. Waiting to be cured with all the forms and everything off. That's what the top looks like. There's the tower waiting to be set on top of the concrete. Here's what it looks like with the tower set. And one of the things that you'll end up doing is that you add some other concrete on top of that to fill in all those holes and stuff underneath the bottom fixture there. But you have to leave it like that. Put the raising fixture on it. You get the tower up, and then you go through there and painstakingly get everything leveled. You get it perfectly level, and then lock it in and let it set for a few days and check it again. But once you get it leveled with those jacking nuts and stuff, then you can go through there, cement everything in, lock the bottom bolts in, and make everything nice and perfect and looks pretty there. If you notice those little black cylinders sticking up, those are covers for the other bolts that would be used if I wanted to put in a 72-foot tower. So far, they haven't been used. This is what the concrete looks like for the little tubular tower, the Wilson there. And you can see everything set in place. I still haven't gone through there and put the final touches on stuff. I just yesterday raised the thing up and did all the alignment and stuff. So you can see my tools there for doing all of that stuff. So when you raise that tower and you get it up there, you got to make sure that the tower is absolutely level. It has to be absolute level, or usually what will happen is that as you raise and lower it, it will drag and it will bind and it won't come down quite right. You'll always see a little problem. So if you get it level, it'll come down and raise correctly. The other thing is that on that base, you'll use a top coat or some grout concrete, and you can apply that to the finish, and then you can go ahead and fill in all the holes, add a little bevel. You can see on this one here, I had a little bevel to end up filling in underneath and locking in all those bolts and making it look nice and pretty. You don't have to do it, but you know me, I'm just a little anal on that kind of stuff. So summary, let's wrap things up. So if you buy a previously loved tower, you'll need to do some repainting, some replate. I suggest I always go through it take all the nuts and bolts, replace all the nuts and bolts, new stuff. You might have to, if a pulley has some wobble to it, replace it. Any of the cables for doing the raising and lowering, I replace all of that kind of stuff. The main thing that you've got to do is read that manual and make sure you understand all the safety, all the things on how to put it together, how to operate it, how to install it properly. So that manual is really important. You must have a detailed plan. If you have a detailed plan and you write the thing out, it's when you put up that tower, it's just like walking through a cookbook. So I'll say that, for me, that tower, yeah, it was a pretty bit expensive, but the main expense that I had was the investment in putting together and getting it put it into the ground. So that once I got it in there, getting a good antenna up on top of it, it's amazing how well that thing works and all the stations and everything that you can work. So if you have questions and you don't know about some of these towers and how to install them or what other problems people have seen, one of the places I found for really good resources is going to Group.io. They have tons of different blogs in there for different kinds of towers, different kinds of problems, a wealth of really good information. If you get an older tower and you can't find the instruction, you can usually go to Group.io and you can find that information there. So that kind of concludes my program here. So I'll turn it back and see if anybody has any questions. Hopefully I didn't bore you and you had some fun looking at a lot of work that went into making that happen.
I do.
Sure.
Where did you come up with the specification for the size of the hole? Was that from the antenna manufacturer?
Antenna manufacturer, that
Okay.
that one page that I showed you there, that from US Towers that had their symbol on the very top, that page there told you the exact size of the hole, the width, the depth, and that's a generalization on reasonable ground. So if you have really sandy ground, you may have to go back to a structural engineer and ask them to take and relook at that based on the dirt. But I have pretty average type of dirt around here. Plus,
Was it
I add an extra 6 inches onto it. Go.
Was the 3,500 pound concrete on the smaller base and 5,500 on the larger?
No, the spec on the bigger base was actually 2,500. I had ordered 3,500, just wanting it a little stronger. When they delivered it, they had screwed up on the order and mixed it at 5,500. Thankfully,
Wow.
I didn't have to pay for that. But I'll tell you what, that is one tough concrete. You don't, no way to chip it.
So at 5,500 pounds, that thing weighed 40 to 48,000 pounds. You think that was big enough?
It's for a 72-foot tower, unsupported. I think that's about right.
So what kind of wind load are we talking about?
100 miles an hour. I don't remember what it was for the wind load for a 72 footer. I don't remember what it was right now. But you can put a big antenna up there and not worry about it.
Yeah.
Actually, I would say the biggest concern would be the rods you put into the concrete for
Dinner's a
holding
little
it.
late tonight.
Hmm?
And
Dinner's a little late tonight.
Thank you, baby.
so I'd say that the biggest concern that I would have would be the rods you put into the ground, so into the concrete. So those are 3 rods. They're 1.5 inches, I think they are, for a 72-foot tower.
Were
So
they stainless?
No, that's regular. That's grade 7, I believe it is. So that that it's still hard to believe those things would end up breaking. But anyway, that's what's in there right now.
Wow.
Any other questions or thoughts or anything?
So,
Scott?
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, Ron, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask something I didn't notice there is, did you run a ground rod through your concrete or next to it?
Yeah, no, I don't think I had a picture of that. There is a ground rod outside. There's no way that I would want to run a ground rod through the base because if you get hit by lightning there, that concrete has a tendency to explode. So I really need to add 2 more grounding rods, but I always put them outside the base. Scott?
Yeah, I think that's the recommendation that I've seen. But my question was going to be, how did you get the antenna up, and when you were leveling it, did you just use a standard level, bubble level, or how did you do that in detail?
Yeah, I got a big old 4-foot carpenter's level,
Hmm.
slapped it up alongside there, and worked out all 3 sides to figure out which way to move things, and used it to take and level things up.
Did you use a crane?
No, no, that if you notice there, I don't have that up there, but it had a raising fixture on the back end of
Oh,
it.
that's right. Yeah. Okay.
So all that is just, and that is a hand crank. And by the time I have a great big X7 Chris Craft, I don't know, high gain antenna on that thing. And it's a big, huge monster up there, plus a 6 meter, plus a um, GP9 up on top of that thing. And that's a steel mast that's on it, not aluminum mast. And so when it comes to pulling that thing up, it's a heavy load to get it up there.
Use a winch?
Oh, yeah,
Hmm.
but it's a hand winch. And so but you know that, and you can see it's doubled up on the pulleys there. So, but it's a good sized load to bring it up there. And then for actually extending the tower, there I have a 1-horse motor that drives that whole process.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions on that?
Very interesting.
Well, all I can say is when we had our tower put up, we had pros. We were very lucky. All the labor was donated to get this tower up, including the tower itself was free. It was It was part of a 200-foot Roan tower for communications tower. It was the top 3 sections, which were 20 feet sections. That was it was all taken down, and this particular tower was used at the Philomath police station for years. And then they took it down and they replaced that. And so and it was lying, the pieces were lying in some farm somewhere out in Alsea. We picked those up. That was given to us. And anyway, this is a standalone tower, but it's not, it's not a crank up tower and it's not a tip over tower. It's just, the sections were put in piece by piece. And we had CPI Power Guy, a team come out that does this for a living, and they used a crane to lift each section, bolt the sections together, and that's how they did it. And it's been sitting in the ground, and I mean it's been up right now for what, 5 years? No issues. We just waiting to put the antenna on top, and so we have one guy who loves climbing towers, so he climbs up there, and he wants to. I wanted to get them to come, the CPI Power to come back out and use their crane again. But he says we can do it without that. He just wants to basically use what do they call it? What this I can't, it's escaping my the name of it is escaping, but the type of you use, it's basically a big pole,
Yeah, gin pole.
gym pole. Yeah. He wants to use that technique. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, depending on the weight of what you have for the tower, you do end up needing to have guy lines in the tower so so you can walk it up and get it up there and it doesn't crash into anything. And then obviously once you get it into the air, then you have to have a way of detaching those ropes. But yeah,
Okay.
and the other thing is that what kind of weight are we talking about for the antenna?
Oh, about 50 pounds, something in that range.
Okay, so that's manageable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely doable. It's just I personally have qualms because I watched him climb the tower a couple of times and he's good at it and all that, but it's a standalone tower. There's no guys, so
Yeah,
uh, but
yeah.
it can take one guy up there. One
When you
person can only climb it.
when you start getting into a 70-pound antenna and up, then it gets really hard to take and do things up there. You need two people up at the top to handle
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
That's my take on it.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, anything else?
No, thank you. That was a great discussion. We never talk about towers, so learned quite a bit here from your experience.
Yeah, well, I just got finished doing that second one, so I thought, and you know what I bring around for 7QPM field day, so I thought it was a good topic there.
Well, that's amazing that you did it all by yourself, too.
Yeah, and actually, here's another thing that to think of. So back on that tubular tower, so that um uh 8 foot, or excuse me, that 6-inch diameter, 20 foot long, 3 sections stuffed inside. That thing weighs about 450 pounds. So, even one end of that, two guys are not going to be able to handle. So you notice that thing got picked up and put into place and pinned correctly so I could raise it. And again, all of that work, 100% of it was done by me, one individual. So it's nice to have a tractor. It's nice that thing I had on a big tractor trailer, and I was able to use that tractor trailer and lift the tongue up and down to get the right elevation so it slipped into the proper mounting on that raising fixture and got it just right. It took me about 5 trips, but um, I was able to slip that bolt right straight in to raise it up.
Mm, great
So,
job.
so that gets into planning. If you do the right planning, it's simple, relatively speaking. And I have yet to kill myself or injured myself on any of that stuff.
Good for you.
Okay, guys, I think um, I'm good here. Anthony, do you want to go ahead and kill the record? And
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining, and thanks, Mike. And we'll catch everybody back in a month.